Welcome to episode 9, Respecting the Harvest, part 3.
All right. Hey, guys. Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. This is Tim Ware, president and of Advancement Coaching Consulting, along with Taylor Cho. Today, we're trying this live podcast thing. This is take 3, and we've decided that if this doesn't work, we're just going to record it and upload it like we did before, but we're going to try it again. We hope you guys will stick with us today as we go through this. We also want to say again that Journey Church is our sponsor from Colleyville, Texas. Pastor Jeff Strickland, great pastor, and actually a client of Advancement Coaching and Consulting. So it's a privilege to have them. It's good to have you back from being sick.
Yes, it's good to be back, to be healthy and back. I thought I was going to go meet Jesus there for a little bit. It's what they would call the man cold. And
a man cold?
Or stomach bug, whatever.
Okay.
I don't know if that was going to take me out or my wife was, but it's good to be back.
Yeah. Okay. So we're supposed to go in here and we're supposed to share this video to say that everybody's out there. See how to do that.
I'm gonna take a moment and say hello.
And if you're watching, hey, let us know. Say hi. And give us a thumbs up if you can hear us and see us, so that we know. This is a little weird that we can actually watch and follow. And
I'm hearing myself over there.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah,
it's really weird. I'm trying to figure out how to not do that now.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Marco. See the guy behind the camera here. He's always share to. I don't know how to do this. I guess it doesn't matter. I can't figure it out. We got to turn the volume all the way down.
Yeah, if we get that fixed. All kinds. We're learning. We're learning and growing and advancing together.
Yeah. So you were out sick, and back in this is episode 9, and episode 7 and 8 is actually supposed to be episode 7. Pastor Todd Barham came in from Cleburne, Hope Church, and he was. He sat in for you, and we did episode 7, Respecting the Harvest, and we realized it ended up needing to be 2 conversations. So episode 7, we talked about respecting the harvest, and it was really, how do I do it myself? How do we as individuals respect the harvest? And we talked about giving grace, and we talked about seeking first to understand, then to be understood, and which is very hard.
Right.
I'll tell you, this past week I was engaged in some of that dialogue, and I didn't do a good job. I didn't do that very well. It's not easy. But then we rolled into, how do we do this as leaders, as pastors, and organizations and congregations? And we really ended up talking about 2 things. Number one, that we need to be authentic, but the biggest piece was really about not being offended. We can't pick up an offense, because when people don't serve the Lord, they don't serve the Lord.
Right.
And so we shouldn't be offended at them not doing the things that we do as believers. And we can't be offended at that. We can't lead out of offense. We have to protect, and we can't become upset when someone gets offended at the gospel.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that the Lord has worked on us.
Yeah.
We have been in this process of being worked on, and what we have come to find in our own journey of convictions and things that the Lord's asked us to stop doing or to do differently. As a non-believer, they may not be there yet. The harvest, they may be a little bit further back, in the journey than what we are, and we forget that sometimes, and we put those expectations. And so just respecting the harvest, that conversation really kind of reminded me of just this journey that I've been on.
Right.
And I'm 30. I've been in church my entire life, and think where I'm at today with the Lord is so different than where I was 15 years ago. Not just because of maturity, but just of longevity,
yeah.
Of being with the Lord and studying and finding out in prayer and hearing and learning His voice. And it's not fair for me to take someone who just joined the journey and go, now you've got to do and have all the same convictions as I do.
Well, or people that are still in the harvest, they haven't joined the journey yet. That's really who we're talking about here. To put those expectations on them. it's an interesting thing that when you in the 1970s, John Ingle, a theologian, came up with what he called the Ingle scale.
Love the Ingle scale.
And the Ingle scale says that there's this continuum that we're all on.
Right.
And 0 is a point of conversion. 0 is a point where I say I'm going to put my faith in Christ. And we're either on the journey to faith,
right,
or we're on the journey of faith. And both sides of that are different. And when I think about the Ingle scale, we have to figure out, I have to treat somebody who's interested in Jesus different than the person who has no interest in Jesus. If I try to treat them the same, it's not going to work. And so this Ingle scale component is really that gives us indications on how we should treat somebody, and it really helps us respect the harvest in the right way. So Caleb, my son, came home from college, came home for Christmas, and he listens to the podcast all the time. And I don't know, you may be watching right now, woohoo, if you are. But so he is here. He is, and he says, "Dad, that was really good. That was great. But what I didn't." He kind of stumbled around like that, and I said it wasn't quite balanced.
Yeah.
And he said, that's the word. So I told him we were already planning to do Respecting the Harvest Part 3 is this episode 9 context, or that's not the right word.
Subject.
Yeah. There you go. Content. One of the things about doing live is Marco can't switch cameras and edit out you scratching your head.
I've had that itch the whole time.
He can't edit out. He's not able to edit out my allergies. So that's the beauty of live, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, or maybe that's not the beauty. That's the hazards of live. But so here we are going to talk today. We want to bring a little balance back to this, a little bit of balance to it, because we've leaned heavy on the harvest, and we should. But there is still some things that how we behave as believers in that's important for us to talk about. Todd mentioned it briefly when he said he gets challenged by people that says you're compromising. You're compromising the gospel. You're compromising these things. And yet Scripture says that the Pharisees accused Jesus of being a friend of sinners, that he hung out with the drunkards, right?
Right.
So that's what we want to talk about.
I think it's important. Like if we're going to reach the harvest,
right,
you've got to go to it.
Oh, you got to go.
You got to go. And we've talked about this before, maybe hinted at it at least, growing up in somewhat of a farming community, at least farmers around us. You pick up on little nuances of the farming lifestyle. And there's this reality that, like I was just thinking a second ago, you don't go to a seed that's recently been planted and expect it to produce fruit right away. Right. It's got to go through seasons and whatnot before it starts producing. But when we're talking about the harvest and how do you maintain your convictions, or how do you maintain the integrity of the gospel for what we know it, and yet how do you respect the harvest? And what we know we're talking about is engaging with them, with the harvest, and interacting and being like Jesus was, a friend to the harvest. I think we have to find that balance. That it's what I've been excited about listening and even asking the Lord to help me throughout the last 2 podcasts and even today. Like, let's really find a tangible balance that we can walk through, because if we're going to be harvest focused, this is a life we're gonna live. We've got to live it. Yeah.
I think, so I've been serving the Lord now for over 40 years and shared my faith lots of times. And one of the things that I've come to discover is that if I'm humble And if I'm authentic by saying, I don't have all the answers, when I walk in feeling, if I come in like God's man with the plan and you got to, this whole thing, people don't, that is actually disrespectful for the harvest. I don't need to come in like holier, because I am. Paul said it, Paul wrote in that he said, I'm the chief of sinners.
Right.
And the reality is, I'm glad we use the term harvest, because it's not lost, it's not sinners, because we were all lost.
Right.
We're all still sinners.
Right.
And so we're on this journey of faith, where some people are still on the journey to faith. And we disrespect the harvest when we come in with a holier than thou attitude, which is part of the challenge. I don't want to speak to your context, but when I was raised, we were proud that we were different.
Yeah.
And we flaunted the differences, and that's a turnoff for people.
Yeah, I think for people I've encountered in coming to faith, people I've encountered who are, they would say, are not on a journey of coming to faith, but they have, everyone's got opinions about it.
Right.
Something that gets brought up sometimes is, I never want to have your lifestyle. I could never not do the things that I do. And when we make a focus, when us as believers trying to reach or trying to go into the harvest, when we make such a big distinction between the two lifestyles, and that's when we put that as the focus of, hey, when you come to faith, there's a different lifestyle, and we know that there is, but when that's the focus, it actually, in my opinion, puts a divide for someone to be able to come.
Now, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't still be different, because our lifestyle as believers, we should offer something different. We should offer hope that the world does, that other people don't have. We should offer joy that can only be found in the Lord. We should offer those things. That there should be a difference. And I think the challenge is, how do you engage people without and maintain that difference?
Sure.
First of all, I do think that compromise is a negative. Relevance, being relevant is one thing, but if my relevance causes me to compromise who I am and who the gospel, who Jesus has asked me to be, then it's a problem. Compromise is a great thing in decision making, but not in lifestyle. And I don't know anybody that respects, believer or unbeliever, that respects somebody who compromises on their values and who they are. When you say something and then do something different, it's hard for me to respect a person like that.
Yeah. I think as soon as you start saying that this is who you are, people you set the standard of integrity for your life, and they're watching it. And so when you set that standard and then you compromise, they're already looking at who you are as a non-integritous person.
Wow.
I was just thinking as you were talking just then that you can, the word relevant, such a hot topic, and it has been for the last couple of years, still very much so, of how do we be relevant. And I was just thinking, Jesus, like you said, they accused him of being a friend of sinners. And I've been in rooms of people that no one would have said Taylor's their friend, just because we were all acquaintances and we were there but when you accuse somebody, or you say, hey, Tim's a friend of, there's some interactions between you and whoever else that person was. So for me, what that tells me is there has to be you can't be more relevant than Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Like he is the center of relevance in this conversation that we're having. So there is a way to be relevant.
But he never compromised.
Right. The way to be relevant without compromising. Yeah.
He never was not the Son of God. What I have found, in my life of being in ministry, and I spent so many years in bivocational ministry and in a construction background, if you will, in an environment like that. And as I was in this, there were, you hang out with guys, and one of the things I learned pretty quick is they would always offer me.
Right.
They, hey, you want a beer? They were trying to do these things. They were always trying to get, and you know what? Now, so there was always that knucklehead who was going to really bully, who's going to try and rag on you a little bit. But most of them, they were not offended by the fact that I said, no, I don't want any. They actually respect, there's a piece of, they're not trying to force me. It's kind of cool if they would offer
right.
That they would offer it to me, and I just say, no, I don't want it. That never turned them off. Now, if I started hammering them about you drunk, that's a turn off piece. Now I'm flaunting holiness,
right,
and I'm actually not being with Jesus. I wasn't being like Jesus in that moment,
right.
And so it's that the balance piece. I think it's more respectful for the harvest for me to maintain my integrity and who I am. Because number one, then they can trust that I am who I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when I do talk about Christ, now it becomes something that's, at least they can say in my life it's believable.
That's good. Because I think they're looking for something that is believable.
Well, yeah.
We're asking them to believe what we all know, what said, faith is the substance of things hoped for. Right? Let's be honest. We're asking people to come on this journey and to believe something that they may not be able to tangibly see in that moment. So we ought to be able to show them some truth in our own life that, hey, this if you can't take that step of believing something that you can't see, like Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. Look at me. We realize that we're not the essence of Christ. We're not, the Savior ourselves. But if we can show them, hey, this is a life that you can that I'm living, that I'm choosing to live and following God in, and I'm maintaining my integrity of who I said I am.
Yeah, well,
it's a piece of it.
I think now the difficulty sometimes in some of the people that watch and listen to the podcast and who we associate with, because in ministry, the accusations is that we often aren't preaching the truth. That we've compromised in
right.
our communication of the gospel, and there is still that component. We have to be real in what we say. We have to be. I remember as a kid, I remember hell being really hot and being and trying to be scared. I mean, scared into heaven.
Yeah.
And all right, there is a heaven, there is a hell. Jesus talked about both. Paul talked about both. We find that they're real, but hell's not a stick for me to beat people with.
Right.
And it's disrespectful for me to talk to people that way in the pulpit or out of the pulpit, on the street corner or in the
yeah.
church foyer.
Yeah.
And
I remember as a 6-year-old, my coming to faith, growing up in the church had been all around it. But I remember as a 6-year-old asking my mom, do you think I'll go to heaven? And she said, of course you would. And I said, no, I think I would go to hell. And I know that the Lord was working inside of me, and I know that I really had a real coming to faith moment in that moment, but it was based out of this fear of not wanting. I didn't want to go to hell more than I understood what going to heaven meant. And I know at that moment I'd given my heart to the Lord, but I can tell you that there's today, almost 20 years later, there's far more in me that's excited about heaven and wanting people, and not just excited about heaven futuristic, down the road, but living the kingdom life now, that I'm far more interested in getting people to be excited about than just having a way out of eternal damnation.
Well, I think so. In this idea of respecting the harvest, so if we go back to the beginning, we need to give grace. Mm-hmm. We need to seek first to understand. We need to be good listeners is what it amounts to. We need to be good listeners. And then as leaders, we need to also not be offended, mm-hmm. and not lead out of offense, not communicate out of offense. And then but we still have to stand tall as believers. We actually have to offer hope by not what was the phrase you used earlier about integrity that you said that
what I was getting at, that when we start saying this is who we are, or this is what we do or don't do, those things, we start setting standards for integrity in our life that people start watching, and that's the standard that they're looking at us going, well, you said that was your standard.
That may be the clearest way for us to wrap this thing up, that as believers, we actually have to be people of integrity.
Yeah.
So if we say we're going to do it, do it. I mean, obviously, there's an authentic piece but that means when I screw up, I have my integrity says, I go and say, man, I blew it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't mean to offend you if I said something or that was I messed up.
Yeah, I think and personally in my own life, and even in this conversation, I really do believe that integrity is founded on just being honest and humble. Saying this is who I am. I'm just going to be honest with you. This is who I am, and being humble enough to say I'm still being worked on.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. Having that honest piece, and so when you encapsulate integrity with those two, honesty and humility, I think you really do set yourself up for being being loved by the harvest.
Well, I think that is a beautiful turn for us, because if I'm a person of integrity, it also means that we talked about that holier than thou component.
Yeah.
It says I'm still on the journey.
Right.
Part of respecting the harvest is letting them know I'm still on the journey. I haven't arrived.
Yeah.
I'm still on the journey.
Yeah.
I don't have it all figured out. I'm on the journey.
Right.
But I'm choosing this journey because of what Jesus has done in my life. And, the testimony of Jesus, we said it last time, is if he's done something in our lives, that's what we should be focusing on. But maintaining that integrity piece, that's a great thought. There's nothing. Well, what is it people always, when people don't want to go be involved in the church or be involved with believers, they always say, oh, the church is full of
hypocrites.
Right.
And, yes. Yeah.
How many times have you heard that?
Oh, all my life.
Yet that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
If people have integrity, it's hard to call them a hypocrite.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, so if you go back to Jesus, he says, remember the trial of Jesus? They couldn't find witnesses who would agree about anything, except that he said, we're going to tear this temple down. The prophetic utterance that came from the Old Testament where he said, we're going to tear this temple down and rebuild it in 3 days. Mm-hmm. And they're thinking about the building, and he's talking about himself.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing. So that in itself, when they couldn't get others to agree, you could see that he had lived a life of integrity, that it was just accusations.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's a great turn for the conversation. That's a great turn. Set the standards and do your best to live up to the standard.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking of Paul. Paul writes that let me say it like this. Paul, we would put Paul on this almost a pedestal.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do. Let's just call it like it is. Sometimes put him on a pedestal. And yet he says that there's still almost this daily struggle that he does. What he really is saying is there's still things in my life that I'm having to be worked on, that I do the things I don't want to do, that I know not to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And we don't know exactly what those were, but I love the fact that he admits it.
Yeah.
That and yet there's still no one would question Paul's integrity. But yet he's admitting, hey, I'm still on this. I love that he said, come, follow me as I follow Christ.
As I follow.
Yeah, as I follow.
Right.
Not, hey, I'm your standard, or I've arrived, or he says, follow me, because I'm following as well.
So recapping one more time, because not giving grace. If I'm actually going to give grace, it means that there's an integrity component in that says you're okay.
Right.
You're on the journey. I'm on the journey.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you what I need.
Right. That's so good.
I'm on the journey.
Yeah.
the integrity piece that says, I'm going to stop and I'm going to listen to you, so I make sure that I understand what you're saying, so I can communicate accurately.
Yeah.
That component. That word integrity really weaves its way all the way through this entire thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, because when it comes to being offended, Jesus, he let's not pick up the offense. Let's get over these things. Let's forgive and let it go.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to be a believer, if I'm going to be, if I'm working in the harvest, if I'm respecting the harvest, if I don't expect them to act like believers because they're not believers, then my integrity is going to say, I know you're on the journey to faith.
Yeah.
And give me some grace on my journey of faith, because I don't have it all figured out.
That's good.
And let's diminish the offense component. And then it's really not a compromised message for me to go, okay, I blew it. Even in what I say from the pulpit, sometimes all those pieces, set a standard of integrity. I love that when we start setting standards, we set the standards that other people are going to hold us to.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a beautiful thought.
Yeah. One quick last thought for me in this with that word integrity. Integrity takes time. No one, if I was to sit here today and you didn't know me and I said, hey, I'm, I don't take baths on Wednesdays, which I do. FYI, I do. But if I say I don't take baths on Wednesdays, you wouldn't.
It's Monday. It's okay. Will you bathe?
You wouldn't say. You would be foolish to say, well, he's a man of integrity. You don't know. You haven't lived through a Wednesday. You haven't smelt me on Thursday. It takes time. It takes repetition. And I think about the harvest, when we're talking about farming, no one goes out to the harvest field and in one day makes a rash judgment.
Yeah.
If we're going to really respect the harvest, it's going to take time. Have integrity is going to take time.
Well, having integrity takes time. And this entire conversation about the harvest, the reality is it's a conversation about a journey.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool that the Journey Church is our sponsor today, because this is really a conversation about taking time. In the old days, we were taught, we talked about in the first episode, in the part one of this, episode 7, we talked about how we were taught an aggressive style of evangelism, confrontational evangelism, and that we were always trying to push people toward the gospel. But every study has shown, and even Jesus says in Luke 10, Jesus says to eat with people. Yeah. He says, heal their needs, then preach.
Yeah.
So the preaching comes at the end, not preaching at the beginning, but we always want to preach at the beginning, because it's about this journey of life, this journey of faith, this journey to faith. It's this, and if integrity takes time, that's part of it. There's a time component, because the truth is, the harvest, they need to see us actually live what we say.
Yeah.
They need to see it. And what better thing can I do to respect somebody who doesn't know, is not a person of faith in Christ, than to live like Christ before them? Not just for a moment, but for months or years,
right,
or for a lifetime.
Right. That's good.
Yeah. So, I had a question in my head, because we always like to end these with kind of a question before, but this shift kind of struck me a little bit. I wasn't expecting it. That's the rawness of the dialogue, right?
The rawness of the dialogue.
And even more raw on a live broadcast. Oh my goodness. One of the things we always ask, what's your takeaway from day?
Yeah, I think, I said it, and it's, the Holy Spirit working through us, I guess, because I haven't really thought much of it on the integrity issue. Like, where in my life am I displaying true integrity? Like, if I was to go out into the dog park today and met new friends, or even the friends that I just met, would they look at my life and go, man, he's a man of integrity? Not just does he live righteous, which they wouldn't even, people don't even know that term, but could you follow my life and say, man, he's a man of integrity?
So I'm gonna ask a question that we'll wrap the day up with in a little different. I'm gonna use a different word instead of integrity. I'm gonna use consistency.
That's good.
So am I consistent? Ask yourself this question today, as a leader, as an individual, as a believer, and even in your, especially if you're a pastor or a youth pastor, you're some staff guy working in a congregation. Ask yourself the question: am I consistent in my respect for the harvest? Am I consistent in how I treat people who aren't people of faith? Maybe even today you might just rate yourself 1 to 10. How consistent are you in your journey, or how consistent are you in how you treat the harvest? So that's it for today.
It's been good to be back.
But yeah, it's good to have you back. Been quite the journey. We'll put some show notes out there when we will post this online as we normally do. There will be the audio on iTunes, so you could share it. You can share obviously this video will be on Facebook, but we will have it on YouTube, and it'll end up on iTunes and Android. And we're working to eventually hopefully in the next few weeks we'll even be on Google Play. So we'll have those things. We'll have this podcast up pretty soon, and we'll put the show notes on the website, advancement.cc. Go there, check it out, share it with your friends, to have them subscribe. You guys subscribe, rate us on iTunes. That helps us out. Anything I forgot?
I don't know. Like us? Did you say like us on Facebook?
No, I didn't say that.
Yeah, like us on Facebook.
And you can even like us on YouTube.
Yep.
All those things. This social media stuff's a little tougher for me. Maybe it's because I'm so old. I look really old up next to you and Todd all the time.
Your birthday's coming up. I know we got to go, but
he's wanting me to tell everybody I'm gonna turn 50.
Ooh.
We'll see you guys later. Thanks for being with us today. And don't forget, you were meant to advance.
Yes.